Hi, I'm Robin Vitucci. On behalf of the AFT, welcome to Teaching. This is our third episode of a conversation series that gives real-time insights into the goals, challenges, and successes of two early career teachers. Each episode, they are joined by a veteran AFT leader in professional development to hear their stories and provide some guidance on their journey of teaching. You can find this episode, along with the others, on AFT's sharemylesson.com. All episodes include accompanying links and resources to go along with the discussion. Now let's get into this month's conversation, family engagement with a specific focus on literacy. Our teachers once again are Sam and Kelly. Why don't you two remind everyone a little bit about yourselves and your teaching experience?
Hi, I'm Kelly Stanifer, and I'm a second-year teacher in Cincinnati Public Schools. I was in a kindergarten autism unit my first year, and this year I'm in an intermediate third and fourth grade autism unit.
And I'm Sam Ramey. I'm a seventh grade social studies teacher, also in Cincinnati Public Schools. This is my second year in Cincinnati and my third year teaching.
Thanks. And now I'll introduce our expert for this episode. Jean Hribar has been in education for over 30 years. Her teaching experience in Berea City School District in Northeast Ohio includes special education, elementary, middle school English language arts, and most recently, an instructional coach. She is the Director of Professional Development for OFT and an AFT National Trainer and Content Creator. She is the proud mother of two alums from The Ohio State University and lives with her husband, a retired teacher in Berea, Ohio. Thanks, Jean, for joining us today. And now I'm going to turn it over to you to start the conversation.
Thanks, Robin, Sam, Kelly. I'm excited to be a part of this journey into teaching with you. I know in the last couple of episodes you've talked a lot about developing positive relationships with your students. Today, we're going to talk about building relationships with parents and families and caregivers. And in particular, I want to talk to you about how to create that partnership at home to better serve your students. And in a little bit, we'll focus on using literacy as a lever to build those relationships. So let's go ahead and get started talking about connecting with parents and families and guardians. How often are you able to connect with families? And do you engage with them outside of the day-to-day academics or behavioral issues you might have in the classroom? Kelly, let's start with you.
Yeah, I have a daily communication log that I send home that has a spot for each specific activity of the day, and it has a smiley middle face or a frowny face for the behavior and a little comment from my area for a comment for a note that I like to send home, like was a great leader or needed to improve, whatever. But we also use Class Dojo at my school, so I can send home direct messages or class announcements. And last year I had a really good relationship with my parents, and this year I feel kind of distant from them, so I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, for me, so typically I use phone and text, probably text more. I found in the past, texting, I mean, especially now, like with how quick the turnaround can be. Text I found more convenient during the day. Especially if a parent can't pick up a phone call. That's helped with communication, with anything that needs to get out quickly. And then phone calls for other things as well and check-ins. I unfortunately really haven't reached out much outside of academic and behaviors. And to be quite honest, this year I've also found myself a little more distant to families and struggling to communicate as well as I have in the past. And that's been a goal of mine, is to increase that communication, and to also think through strategies of how to create time and strategies to be more productive in those conversations. So I'm also looking forward to this conversation that us three are going to have.
Sounds like a great start. It sounds like you're both trying to maintain some sort of regular communication with families, which is great. You mentioned engagement opportunities, and we'll get in more in depth about that in a little bit. Sam, I understand that you recently had parent-teacher conferences. How did those go for you?
Yeah, they were actually just ended 30 minutes ago. So very fresh and they went well. Typically we don't get a lot of parents. And I mean, relatively, we still didn't really get a whole lot of parents. I think we got about 13 tonight. But I would say that's double, if not more, than what we've gotten this year and all of last year in the four conferences we had. So that's a step in the right direction. And then all the conversations I thought were productive. I gave out I know teachers, have different opinions on this. I haven't had like traumatic experiences with parents, so I've been fine with giving my personal number out. So I was giving that out tonight, and hoping that will kind of make the communication easier, quicker. And I told them that they can reach out, with anything they need if they want to check in on work or whatever that may be, and I can get to them when I can get to them, and hopefully that can help things out. But I thought it went well overall.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like you had an improvement in turnout. I know that when you prepare things to share with parents ahead of time and then they don't show up, that's a big frustration when you
Mhm.
have all that information at your fingertips to give to them and there's no one to give it to. A couple ideas you might want to consider for those parents who didn't show up. One thing I've used in the past has been just a real simple template that I actually have the students fill out ahead of time. There's a space for each subject, and the students can comment, or if you want to use a rating scale, to tell what they feel they do well with in their
Mm.
particular subject and things that they struggle with in that particular subject, what they find positives, negatives about the class that they're in, things like that. If the caregiver doesn't show up for conferences, you can always send that home with the student and ask them to initial it so that you know they got it. Leave a space for the parents to reply to you with anything. So that's worked in the past to help increase that communication a little bit for parents that don't come. If you're able to have your students fill something like that out digitally, you can just zip it in an email and send that home. And, I regret that you weren't able to attend. However, here's some information I would like to share, that kind of thing, and request a reply. Now, there's still no guarantee that you'll get a response with either one of those options, but at least you've put in a little ownership on the students. You've put it back into the parents' lap. They know that you want to reach out and have a conversation with them, and you're still making that effort to communicate their progress with their caregivers. What about you, Kelly? How have your conferences gone?
So I've had two conferences this year as well, and I had two parents show up in the beginning of the year and then no parents show up at the second one, which was less than last year when I felt like I had better communication, but even then, I don't feel like I had that many show up.
The ones that did show up, did you have a good experience with them?
Yes, so I was prepared this year to kind of get scolded at both of them, but then they both turned out really well. The first one, we kind of brainstormed some ideas to help a student with their behavior and to get them what they needed. And I helped get those parents some resources for doctors at Cincinnati Children's, which they really appreciated. And then I also had another parent go down to the previous teacher from last year and tell them how much they care loved that I cared about the students, which felt really good to hear.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that turned out to be a positive experience for you. I think that's really important that you keep up that communication with them, so to show them that you're on the same team to help their kiddos. Um, Conferences they're useful for families and students, but they're also beneficial to you as a teacher. What you learn from talking with those parents can also be a form of reinforcement for what you've been doing with the kids, or it can also be constructive feedback for you so that you know some tweaks you might make to your own craft. Caregivers can provide really unique insights into their children's strengths, what their children's weaknesses are, if they happen to have learning preferences, and certainly if there's anything going on at home that you might need to know about that could be impacting their education. All of these things can help you with your instruction and figure out what kind of supports or what kind of other strategies that the students might need. Parents might also share some feedback about classroom activities that you give or assignments that come home with their kiddos. And that feedback can help you adjust those assignments or your instructional approaches, just in case you need to provide different supports for those students. Conferences are definitely useful tools. Typically, they only happen once or twice a year, though. So let's talk about some other ways that you can connect with families throughout the school year. Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Like I said, I do the daily communication logs and I try to send a class dojo home and to the individual parents once a week. Um, Outside of that, I find it hard to muster up the energy to build those relationships after work hours and to go that extra mile, which I know isn't great and I need to find that energy, but on top of all the tasks, it's just hard to do that sometimes.
I was just gonna build off of what Kelly was saying um and just say I've also struggled this year with the energy. I would say in the past, a tip that I would throw out there is if you're comfortable with it and you can set boundaries. I do really like the texting that's helped, particularly with behaviors, because if unwanted behaviors are happening in the classroom, and I have a good relationship with the parent and I'm able to text in the moment and the student knows that, that helps not only with like communicating the bad behaviors but also the good behaviors and reinforcing the good behaviors when they happen. And then I can show like I've shown kids the text like, hey, like you're doing great today, I just texted your mom. They're like, woohoo. So like that's something that I think I need to start doing more of this year. Um, you mentioned something earlier I wanted to touch on too, of how parents can, give unique insights on the kids. And it made me think of a student I have this year, and I was talking to a parent earlier in the year. I was kind of having trouble with the student in their organization and trying to communicate with the student and just feeling like the feedback wasn't being implemented and feeling like that student wasn't really engaged with what was going on. Well, that student has gone through speech therapy for a while, and that's not it, that student currently isn't in speech therapy, so it wasn't something like on the record that I could see. But it was more of like that student just doesn't have a whole lot of confidence with the speech still. Even though they don't need the therapy, it's like an insecurity. So that like was a huge insight for me of like there's a speech barrier here, and they're like, and then the student, the parent, and I were all together. And then that there's just an understanding there. And I think that made the student a little more comfortable with me being, in on what was going on. And then I could be a little more understanding of what was going on and be more intentional with how I was communicating to that student. So I definitely need to get better with parent engagement because it's so important as we're talking about. And I guess those would be examples of things that have gone well in the past.
That is a great example. Anytime you can make those connections, and sometimes it's those little things that we're just not aware of. Even if we read our records and read folders and files that are coming to us with new students, we can't know everything. So to be able to have those conversations with parents is certainly helpful.
Mhm.
Kelly, you mentioned about just being tired and exhausted with everything there is to do. Unfortunately, extra time is non-existent in this profession. You need time for lesson planning. You need time for creating lessons, for emails, for grading papers, for giving feedback, all of those things, not to mention just to even eat your own lunch. It's definitely a juggling act on a daily basis. And just when you think you might catch up a little, of course, something else gets added to your plate. However, there is a little bit that's doable. And if you take it in bite-sized pieces, you view it in terms of small doses, you can start making a little bit of an impact into engagement with families. The obvious place to start is with your planning time. And I know that there are a million things to do, probably a million and one by the time you get to sit down at your desk. But you can start by setting yourself a timer. Just give yourself 5 minutes each day of your planning time and use it for some really quick targeted communication. And these are really quick hits, things like a quick reminder that somebody needs to turn something in, or it might be an FYI that so-and-so did a great on their math test today. Something really specific that you can share with a specific caregiver. And if you do have an issue that needs a longer conversation, you can take that same quick bit amount of time and just schedule it for a longer conversation in the future. Either way, you're making that communication, you're reaching out, and you're engaging with the parents. Also remember, we do want students to be responsible and owning their own learning. So by empowering them to go home and share their work with their parents and get feedback from their parents that can come back to you. All of those things are a great way for parents to see what their child's learning in school firsthand, and they ask questions and to build up that homeschool communication. Technology is another thing that is definitely your friend. If you have a class website or if you have a blog that you can share updates, assignments, homework, any resources for your families on the front end, that helps eliminate a lot of questions on the back end for things. And if your district allows it, you might want to consider using apps. Kelly, you mentioned that you use Class Dojo already. Great way to share photos and videos and just updates throughout the day. And it doesn't have to be anything lengthy. If you have 1 minute during a transition time, you can send a quick hit with one of those as well. Email, if you have a group email, you can send out the same email to all your parents in one click, and that can be just a quick communication email reminder about something, or even a picture of something that was done in class that day. And that's really quick. It hits all of your parents at the same time. And if you do it a couple, once or twice a week, you're keeping that consistent communication going. Another thing you might want to consider is at the very beginning of the school year, I know we're a little past that, but creating a video, just a 2-minute video of yourself that you could email home that introduces yourself, and here are easy ways to connect with me. Here are times that I'm available to talk to you, so that they know when's a good time to reach out to you. And it could just be something as simple as that. They don't know when a good time is to reach out. And then if they have all that information up front, then they can act on it later in the school year. Semester's a great time to send another 2-minute video. Hey, just want to reconnect, reintroduce myself, let you know how things are going this semester, just to keep that communication path open between home and school. Another way to lighten the load with your communication at home is to partner with a colleague to share family communications. Is that something either of you are doing?
So I have a classroom that has traveled together for most of their schooling career, and I like to go back to their teacher from the previous school years to ask for advice on how to get in touch with parents. Um, a lot of the time it's about like IEPs or kind of how to approach a situation, not really outside of academics. Um, I do see a parent on a regular basis at the end of a day when she comes and picks up her kid. And my parent will also sometimes wait for the mom, so then she'll relay information. And that does kind of lighten the load because then I can go in and get things done that I need to get done.
It's great to have that extra set of hands available too. Yeah. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is I think the use of the technology and the online systems we have could really help. I'm thinking through even now, just after you talking, like how I could set up my Canvas page and maybe have a parent section to where they could get on Canvas and get into the parent section, and then there's just direct communication about different things. And like you said, doing that on the front end can help on the back end. But with team members, we occasionally talk about parent contacts. I wouldn't say it's a super consistent thing. We can definitely do better. But I mean, there have been a couple of times where we've done like team calls together, and I found that those have been successful because you get a bunch of different perspectives at the same time to the family. So it's kind of like a parent teacher conference night over a phone call. But I think we could do better, and having or building those productive relationships as a team with the families to then leverage those later on.
When you do use that collaborative planning time to reach out to parents, it's definitely a time saver for sure, because everybody's on the same page in the same room at the same time. Definitely one way to work smarter, not harder, particularly so different teachers aren't duplicating the same work by reaching out and having the same conversations over and over. You can also split tasks with them, like sending emails. Maybe one person does it this week, somebody does it the next week, splitting phone calls. It's really important to have that transparent communication with your colleagues too, to share that information about any family concerns you might have or other needs within the family. You all want to be on the same page when it comes to supporting those kiddos. And don't forget, sometimes you need to lean on your principal or a school counselor for support too. Sometimes they might have that information to help you reach out to families in cases where you're having trouble communicating. Sam, you were really fortunate that that was brought up in about the child with the speech issue. That was brought up in a conference. Something like that, if you were still having troubles, you could reach out to a school counselor and maybe they would have had those insights as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I don't, like, most of the time when I'm talking to a counselor or principal, it's like very like directed on the student and that's not necessarily on the family. Like that's something I feel like is only like my responsibility to figure out. But definitely leaning on them for strategies and their own expertise is something I could utilize. And I love what you brought up about like splitting things up with the team. I think that could help our team with communicating more. Like, we have 6 or 7 people on our team and we split up our 100 some kids, and now it doesn't feel like such a heavy weight on our shoulders. We all have a little part to play each day, and over time each family can be connected with. So I'll definitely bring that up. I think just a general challenge too that seems to kind of be out of our control, but I'd love your perspective on, is the engagement from the family. And what happens when we are making the effort but there's no effort back, or parents block school numbers, or they end the communication and then plans aren't followed through. Like, I found that to be really frustrating. It's like I call a family and the number's blocked because they don't want phone calls from the school. Have you experienced that, or do you have any tips or advice with that?
I don't think there's a teacher out there who hasn't experienced
Yeah, I mean, I just asked, being nice and not making assumptions. But
Oh,
yes, I would agree that everybody's experienced that at some point.
yes, absolutely. It's definitely frustrating when you try to reach out to a family and they don't respond. You just get crickets. The first thing I would do is try different methods of communication. If you've been emailing, try a phone call. If you've been phone calling, try an email, try voicemail, try text message. If you've been, sometimes, a different approach just might get their attention if you just try a different way. One thing I have found is that often the parents who might not respond or might block our numbers or don't communicate with teachers, those are the ones who have only ever received negative communications in the past. Might have been something negative for academics, or there was a behavior issue. So, what's very helpful sometimes is just trying to reach out with a positive instead. And it doesn't have to be anything huge, something small. Your child was a great listener today. Your child helped another student with their homework today. Something small that really praises that kiddo. And it may surprise you just how much that changes the communication and opens that door to build a relationship. Once a parent starts hearing good things about their kiddo, it's amazing how much they want you to reach out more to them. And you might even find that as a side effect of that is that a child's behavior might change too, because now they know they're having positives on both ends. So that
Mhm.
could benefit both at home and school. Another thing is you have to be persistent. You have to be persistent, yet you have to maintain being respectful. You can't give up easily, but you can't be too assertive. There's a really fine line in there. You have to keep trying to reach out. You have to be patient. You have to be understanding. And you always need to keep in the back of your mind that we really don't know what situations families might be dealing with at home. There could be a very valid reason why a parent can't get back to us. And if that's the case, we have to listen with empathy. We have to understand with empathy and just keep in mind that there's a bigger picture sometimes beyond what we have the ability to see. Having said that, it's very important that you always document everything. You have to keep a really good record of any attempts you make to communicate with the family, jot down dates and times of phone calls, when you send emails, any meetings you may have had with them. All of that documentation can be really helpful down the road if there are issues. And again, if you're still having trouble, you might want to loop in your principal or your school counselor. They might have that information to help you reach out to that family or take other steps that might be necessary. One last thing that you should remember is you are not alone. Many teachers face very similar challenges, and you can't be afraid to ask for help from other people. No, none of us are in this alone. Remember that while it's important to hold parents accountable, it's also very important to maintain that positive and supportive relationship with them.
Thanks, Jean. I really like that you said that we're not alone, because that's what I wanted to do with this podcast and be a part of it, is to let other teachers know that they're not alone, because it does feel like that sometimes. You talk about building a positive relationship. Are there any small, easy things that I can do to get families engaged? Because I know that everybody does have a busy schedule, like you said, or that things might be going on. And I want to find a reasonable way to incorporate families and also respect my energy and boundaries and find that balance. I mentioned earlier that I helped with the fall festival, but I find it hard to find the energy on top of all of the other things, like I said earlier.
Kelly, extending your workday can definitely be exhausting. Instead, you're going to want to start with those quick positive notes or emails. Just 1 or 2 names a day. Take your class roster, choose 1 or 2 names, block off that 5 minutes, set your timer, and send out those 2 emails. And in no time, you're going to have sent something positive home to all of your families. If you're working with a colleague, Sam, I think you alluded to this earlier, split your rosters with them. And that makes the list even shorter for you to do. So if you have a list of 20 kids and you can send 2 contacts home every day, you've gone through 10 of those in 1 week. So it won't take long to have reached out to every single family that you have in your classroom if you just do those little tiny bits and pieces. The other thing you might want to do is try inviting parents into your classroom for various things. Maybe if you have younger kids, it could be a read aloud. You might invite a parent in that has an interest or a hobby that they want to share. It could be a craft project. They could talk about what they do for a living. All of these things, there are a lot of ways to relate all of them to the curriculum that you're using in your classroom. And you'd actually be surprised who takes you up on that. And just showing parents you have an interest in what they have to offer helps build that relationship with the family as well.
I appreciate all that advice. And I'm sitting here thinking about how to implement it in different ways. So like, for example, how can we utilize this and maybe some other tips for like specific academic plans? And I think of a moment last year, in terms of literacy, we can, kind of transition a little bit here. I had a student I was really working with reading and writing, and I had really good contact with home for a little while, and my relationship with this student became very solid, is still solid to this day, even as that student's an 8th grader now. However, the relationship with the parent faded, and I found it hard to like keep the communication streamlined between me and the parent in regards to the academic plans and kind of like all 3 of us being accountable to helping the student increase their literacy skills. So do you have any advice in terms of like specific academic plans and how to keep parents involved in that and not lose it? right? Because I mean, there could have been something that I did or didn't do that kind of lost that engagement. Or maybe just things I didn't think of to further engage that parent, make them feel more involved, or I don't know. I'm thinking through things of like how to keep the parents in on the academic side of things that could help them in the classroom.
Yeah, it's always important to reinforce with parents that you work as a team to support their child. I think when you're talking about formal behavior plans, formal academic plans, IEPs, things like that, parents, of course, have to sign off on them, right? So there is a degree of accountability there. However, you might want to think about pre-scheduling check-ins, whether they're monthly check-ins or biweekly emails, biweekly texts, something like that. So if the communication fades for whatever reason, you still have something in the books to follow up with, something that they already have on their calendars. So they've already scheduled things around it. Not much of in the way of preventing them from attending, that kind of thing. And having those clear timelines for progress checks, for reviews, that is always helpful. Again, I would use technology as often as you can to share updates. Always keep those detailed records of when you do reach out. In the end, if a parent consistently fails to follow through, you really have that documentation that you upheld your part, and it might be time to involve that school counselor or that school administrator again. But definitely those pre-scheduled check-ins, I think, would be really, really helpful to keep that communication going in a regular way. Sam, you also mentioned literacy. So let's talk a little bit more about family engagement around literacy. And there's a whole lot of research out there that shows when you engage families around a specific issue like literacy, it really has a really big impact. It shows that strong family engagement has a really positive impact on student achievement, especially in literacy for a lot of reasons. When you involve parents in things like that, the students actually feel supported and they feel encouraged, which leads to motivation. When you involve families around literacy, it obviously would lead to improved reading and writing skills, and that'll translate into better grades and higher test scores. When families are engaged around something specific like literacy, they're helping their children see how important it is. They're connecting to what's going on at school with what's going on at home. And all of that helps create a really positive culture where everybody feels valued, everybody feels connected. Kelly, have you done any family engagement around literacy?
Yeah, so my school does a literacy night where families can come in and get resources like books or other instructional materials to help them with literacy. And I want to be more so involved with inside my classroom. I agree that parent involvement I have seen it increase when I send home those positive notes, but I'm nervous to send home homework because in college we learned about a study that said homework is less effective for younger students because we've all learned things different ways. So who knows how each generation at home has learned it, and then if they get more frustrated, I don't want them to come back to school and not like whatever assignment I gave them. So that's what I'm worried about when I send things home. I know a previous teacher had their homework assignment be to simply read a book with their family member and kind of have them sign a sheet to say they did it. And I think I might want to implement that and get that started again.
I think that's probably one of the best and easiest ways to start that family engagement with quote unquote homework is by having students read at home. That's fantastic. I do agree with what you said about homework. It's certainly not effective if children are practicing something the wrong way at home, and then it's just a whole reteaching the following day. I think the trick is to encourage activities at home that aren't necessarily dependent upon what resources or abilities the parents might have, because there are some families who might struggle with literacy themselves, as well as their students. So when you're working with families like that, it's really important to approach that situation with empathy. You have to be very understanding of where people are coming from, and all of that helps build that trusting, positive relationship. So the focus needs to be on not necessarily what the parents can, what homework they can help out with, or what worksheet they can help their child do. But the focus needs to be more on how you can collaborate to support the kiddos. And some simple, really simple, practical strategies, especially with the younger ones like you work with, are to just help them develop their oral language and their vocabulary, everyday conversations. Vocabulary is always where you get the biggest bang for your buck. So sending home maybe a short list of vocabulary words that they can use in conversation throughout the week is a real simple thing to do. Um, you might want to send home some question stems that parents can use with their kiddos about how to talk to them about their school day. I can't count how many times I may have asked my own children, "How was your day today?" And they say fine, and that's literally the end of the conversation. And changing those things around to, what was the best part of your day, or tell me 3 things you did today, and using those open-ended questions to get kids talking. So really focusing on that oral language, because oral language is the basis of all other literacy. Another strategy might be to have students do a brain dump at home, have them write down everything they learned that day, share it with their parents, and their parents initial it. And boom, there's their homework. And it also served as a review for everything that they did in school that day. And all that retrieval practice really helps make learning stick for the kiddos. You can also provide resources for them, things like audiobooks or podcasts they could listen to, videos that they could enjoy together and talk about. One of my favorite things is just to connect them with the public library. If you have the ability at school to maybe take a field trip over to your public library, you can take your kids over there where they can get their very own library card, which makes them feel very special. It's a big motivator, particularly for those little ones. Makes them feel very, very important. And libraries are always willing to partner with parents and partner with teachers. So that's a really big in with developing that whole sense of community.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of going to the library as a field trip, because then the parents could even come, and that builds the connection there too. You're talking in person and it's a more relaxed setting. And they also get a library card and access to books. So thanks for those tips. I definitely want to be more engaged with families and make sure I'm able to provide families with the resources that they need.
We will also link some of those resources along with this episode. There's a few that I highly suggest. One of them is Reading Rockets. It's a website online, Reading Rockets. There's a lot of research-based information in there, a lot of practical tips for both parents and teachers. The articles in there, real quick reads, real easy reads, gives a lot of information. I'm not sure what your language population is, your English language learner population, but Coloring Colorado is another site that provides bilingual resources to support English language learners and their families as well. First Book is a nonprofit book site. They work to remove barriers for kiddos so that for low-income families where they can access books and build those home libraries. Another AFT website is Reading Universe. That has a ton of information in there about teaching all kinds of reading skills that kiddos might be having deficits or gaps with. Start with a book. There are a ton of guides and activities for reading and writing in there. And Sam, even for you, there's a site called Adlit, which is all things adolescent literacy. And knowing that social studies is a real heavy reading content area, there might be some tips and tricks in there for you too.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm gonna look through these sources. I'm also gonna share them with my team as well. I think not only will these help us in the classroom, but they'll help us when we talk to parents as well. And maybe we can share this with families. There's some things you said earlier too, that like vocab, streamlining vocab to families is something I didn't really consider. And I'm thinking about it now of like, when I communicate with families, email or text or whatever, like I could send them vocab words we're doing in class. And then maybe they can quiz them at home, and maybe I just send like 4 or 5 words, and it's like, hey, when you're eating dinner tonight or doing whatever, ask them who the plebeians were in ancient Rome, right? Like, so they can get some of that vocab. And social studies is the vocabulary I found is tough because unfortunately the social studies aren't a huge priority at the moment at lower levels. So then their social studies vocab and just terms that we expect them to know aren't known. And then, academic language reading, different studies and stuff, obviously at the 7th grade level is challenging. So I think vocab is huge. And then also just communicating the importance of reading with families. Like today, every family I saw, I told them to make sure their child has a book in their hand all the time. And I feel like at the 7th, 8th, and then obviously high school, reading seems to like not seem as important of like a skill to learn because it's expected they already have mastered that skill. Um, but I mean, we can always become better readers, and obviously you get better at reading by reading. So I think just reminding our parents that like, hey, we should always be reading and always have books in our hands. And I think the library is another great tip with that. With all of that and everything we've talked about, do you have any like big picture messaging? And I know you've given a lot of great tips, but if you could think big picture wise, take a few steps out, is there anything that you would give advice that, we can use to bring this topic to our colleagues or when we talk to families on a more granular scale, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to literacy, I think we really do need to come together as an entire community to support our children. It's not just the teacher's job in the classroom. Literally, literacy is truly the foundation for everything, for all subjects in school. Being successful in the workplace, the earlier we can build literacy skills, the more successful our students are going to be in all areas. I love that you told your parents your child should always have a book, always. And unfortunately, I think we have to compete with a lot of technology for that.
Mhm.
Um, Not necessarily a Kindle either, but gaming and websites and things like that. So the importance of having those books available, building those home libraries, uh, the importance of the public library so that they can borrow books. Parents, they play a vital role, reading aloud to their little ones, talking about books, providing a rich print environment at home. All of these things help support our kiddos. I'll tell you what, when I was teaching middle school language arts, I don't care how old the kids were, they love to be read to. So even in your 7th grade social studies class, if you can hook up with your English language arts teacher and say, hey, what's a good book that would be a good read aloud to go along with content X, Y, or Z that you're teaching right now, and just to spend a few minutes in a class period to read aloud to your kids.
Mhm.
That building those listening skills helps with their comprehension, all of those things. No matter how old they are, they love to be read to. I will point out that AFT has some family engagement modules for teachers where teachers can share strategies with parents. And these are things like how to help with specific reading skills their child might be struggling with, how to use everyday experiences and explanations to help develop language skills, how to use those read alouds with children to develop their comprehension skills like predicting and questioning and summarizing. And circling back to, we were talking about community and relationships. Schools can partner with local libraries and parks, and those organizations can provide activities for children while teachers are working with the parents and modeling these strategies with parents and caregivers. I think it's really important to not just hand out resources and say, hey, look at this, but also to show parents what to do with them. All of this, it helps families support what their children are learning in school. And when everyone's on the same page and rowing in the same direction, I think we're almost guaranteed that our students will be successful. And all of these things help create a supportive, inclusive learning environment. It empowers families to support their children's literacy development, even when they do face personal challenges with literacy at home. So my hat's off to the both of you for being here and for wanting to try things in your classroom and support all of these initiatives. And I think you're doing a great job, and it sounds like you guys are on the road to a very successful career.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank
that
you
and
so
all your
much.
advice.
Well, we've reached the end of our time together, and I just want to thank Sam and Kelly once again for joining us and for sharing your story and how things have been going, and for all the great tips that you have for just from the years of experience that you have. And I want to thank Jean for sharing your expertise and all of the work that you do for AFT. I just want to thank you for sharing that with us. Hopefully, Sam and Kelly and our listeners were able to take away some strategies from what you said that can help with family engagement and talking with those families about literacy. AFT will have the resources that you mentioned, along with a few others, on Share My Lesson when we have this episode live. So join us there and join us next time on Welcome to Teaching.